Welcome, dear friends. I have to apologize for my voice today. It's a little raspy, so I'm sorry ahead of time for that. How is everyone doing today? Can I just get a thumbs up? It's a beautiful day today, so I'm just really excited to be here. It's sunny and beautiful here in Chapel Hill/Durham, so hopefully everyone will enjoy the weather at some point today. I just really want to thank everybody for joining us once again and for having these courageous and brave spaces and conversations. Today, we're going to continue studying the letter of the address, Sadie Oglesby's address to the convention of 1927 of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. And I just want to mention that we started studying it last month. So we're not going to go back over what we studied, but we're going to start where we ended. And I hope that as you join us every month, you can go back and read what we studied and then come ready. I mean, no pressure if you don't get to it, but I'm just saying I'm not going to go back every time is what I'm trying to say. Also, I would love for us to, if you have any resources or anything like that, please go ahead and use the chat. But I would really love for the discussion to happen in the space and not in the chat. So when you have comments or questions, let's really use this space effectively and not necessarily have two spaces going at the same time. So that would be really great if we could use the spaces that way. And so we're going to get started. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have, I have the PowerPoint and I have excerpts on the PowerPoint for where we started. And today I actually inserted some guidance and writings from different scholars of color, as well as some guidance from the National Spiritual Assembly to kind of bring together what Sadie Oglesby was saying in 1927. So we're going to have a little bit of a mix. And I hope, you know, what we will be talking about will be slightly uncomfortable, and I hope that you can stay in the discomfort and really stay with us as we're having the discussion. All right, let's get started. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint. Here we go. Can I have a couple of volunteers? Let me just pull up my screen real quick. Who can alternate reading?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Janae. Hi, how are you?
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. Anybody else would like, so we can kind of alternate and then it can be a smooth transition every time? Any other volunteers?
I volunteer.
Thank you, Jackie. Anybody else? We just need 3 people.
Read. Elizabeth, Liz, I can read.
Okay, thank you. Who was that? Sorry, I can't tell.
Diane.
Oh, Diane. Okay, great, wonderful. All right, so Janae, would you like to start? And the order will be Janae, Jackie, and Diane.
Okay. He said, no doubt the white people of America are watching to see what the Baha'is are doing with the colored people. And when they see the white Baha'is accepting the colored people as brothers in every sense of the word, it will give them confidence in your religion, and they will join with you, helping to establish universal brotherhood. But as long as we don't absolutely practice this, we are keeping the white Baha'is out of the cause.
Thank you. So this is where we ended last week. So we're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about this question, but I did just want to read the last piece that we read last week and then move on to the next piece. And the questions were, and maybe you can take this with you as we start continuing our discussion. What would white Baha'is accepting the colored people as brothers in every sense of the word look like today in our personal and community life? So I think we had some time to discuss this last time. What would you do for your brother or sister? And what are some ways you would nurture, encourage, and safeguard your brother or sister in your community, knowing the current realities we live in? And so these were some of the questions that we ended with last time. And I don't know if there are any last minute or final comments on this. I know not everybody was here last time when we were discussing this, but if anybody has, you know, anything they really want to share, we can start there and then move on to the next slide. And if you have something to share, please raise your blue hand. All right. Okay. Oh, Shanae.
Well, you know, I was, yeah, I had to search around for my blue hand. One of the things, well, two things about this that strikes me in terms of your question. I don't know how many folks have younger siblings, but I know that in the period that I was growing up, a big thing, particularly with school kids, you know, when somebody threatened your younger sister or brother, you were always right there to defend them and take care of them and make sure that nobody harmed them. And, you know, that's one of the thoughts that come to mind. It's just that when we truly, truly accept people in our family, we do everything we can to protect them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. That's so important to think about when we think about what does that mean within our spaces, in our communities. And so I think also, I just want to add to that, there are two steps. One, we have to learn and notice, right? And acknowledge when something is happening to our brothers and sisters. And some of that takes education and work on our part to figure out, okay, what does a microaggression look like? What does it look like when this is an unjust space? And then what do you do about it when you notice it? And so these two steps, thinking about how we can apply them in our lives and in our community. All right, I'll go ahead. Here we go. Jackie. I don't think we hear you, Jackie.
I was kicked off and came back on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. He asked me this question. Do you think, Mrs. Oglesby, if the Baha'is of America would simply remove from their hearts every trace of prejudice, it would draw the colored people in great numbers to the cause? Do you think it would deter the white people from coming in? I said, undoubtedly, the colored people know that in America they have thousands of staunch white friends who would be delighted to see a group willing to practice absolute justice to the colored people, and they would be glad to join hands with them. What would practicing absolute justice towards our Black brothers and sisters look like in our community?
As you want to share and comment, sorry, here we go. What I'm going to do is, as I've done before, like I said, I'm really sorry. I apologize about my voice today. I'm going to stop sharing and copy what we just had on the slide so that we can see each other as we're having the discussion. And I'm going to paste it in the chat. Here we go. So the question is, what would practicing absolute justice towards our Black brothers and sisters look like in our community? So thinking about the communities that we're in, what does that look like? And we can even start with defining what is absolute justice? What is absolute justice? What does that mean to us? You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. Yes, Catherine.
Okay, when we are talking about absolute justice, well, when I see justice is when, okay, when a white person stands up against another white person. I'm gonna take myself for instance. In school, there was one, because at the time when I entered school, we started desegregation then. So back then the black schools were closed and everyone had to go to the white schools. So it was at one time that a white friend, I mean, he stood up. I had hurt my foot on crutches. Everyone was going to class but me. And he said, "I'll stay with you." That one act made us friends for life. And he was always standing up for me no matter what. But that first step, I mean, I was so amazed that he did it, because before none other white person would have said anything. But to this day, we are friends. And we talk about everything. I mean, we can talk, because when he stayed back with me, we talked. And I think that's when justice come, when people are like other kids in my school. The white kids were really hard on them, and no, and you could see it, and none of the white kids would stand up with against their friends. But to us black kids, we fought. We had to do the fighting, but it didn't bring anything close because the whites didn't stand up for us. So I think when the whites start standing up and say, "No, you shouldn't do that," then it'll come together, being just in their dealings with blacks, standing up for them, letting them know, "I'm on your side, that wasn't right," and letting their white friends know that wasn't right. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. Thinking about justice, that's a really great example of what justice looks like, on a practical level. So thinking about our communities. Yes, Janae.
I didn't get my hand up this time. One of the other things, and people don't think about this because there are things on the books that people know about, but they say, well, we don't really enforce this anymore. How many of you have heard of sundown laws? Okay. Do you know that in many places in your CCNRs, they still exist? But how many folks, when they go to purchase a property, say, why is this still here? Whether we enforce it or not. Because one day, think about the situation that we're in now. There are these very antiquated laws that our soon to be ex-president have utilized to his advantage because they were on the books. Mm-hmm. So you just never know. And it's just something to think about when you think about justice.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, because even when thinking about buying property, or even the spaces that you are engaged in, it could be different churches. Once again, I'm really sorry about my voice. It could be different churches that we enter, different spaces. The land that we're buying have all of these different codes that sometimes we don't even bother to read the fine print, that perpetuate redlining and different ways in which societies are structured to continue segregation and prevent access to different resources and put lives in danger every day. So can we maybe think about some examples in our community, and maybe even in Baha'i spaces where we've been, and this is not to criticize Baha'i spaces, but I think it's important to have the discussion of, you know, and then to learn from it and say, how can we change it and how can we shift our thinking where absolute justice was not practiced, or how you could have done better within that space to seek absolute justice. Yes, Kathy.
One small but concrete example is when we're having conversations and African American friends, either Baha'is or friends of the faith, I'm talking now in a Baha'i context, when they share their experiences, I have seen where other Baha'is, usually white Baha'is and Persian Baha'is, get uncomfortable listening to their experiences, their lived experiences, which are very real and very valid. And oftentimes then the conversation is diverted, and we don't stay present in the moment to absorb what our friends, African American friends and friends of color, are sharing with us. And when we listen, we gain so much in order to appreciate what some of the basic things are that we need to address and change.
Thank you, Kathy. So thinking about how do we really stay in the discomfort? Because I know even in this space, you know, there's a lot of silence. And how do we, rather than be uncomfortable, how do we embrace the discomfort of the silence and even ask why is there so much silence, right? Start thinking about silence from that perspective, and what it means. Silence says a lot. I see, Chuck, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm out walking, so I'm going to put up my picture. I was thinking about the hidden word that we read first. I think Baha'u'llah is redefining what justice is, you know, to see with your own eyes and not through the eyes of your neighbors, and hear with your own ears. And that, I think, links into what Kathy just said about listening, really hearing, and not believing the misinformation and all that's floating around us. And I know that helped me personally a lot to just listen to my African American friends and believe what they said without question. You know, that helped me a great deal in my kind of growth away from whiteness. And in Baha'i communities, one of the things that strikes me about justice is, and this is a hard one, is how do we apply, say, the loss of administrative rights? Are those applied? Are they tainted by some of what we carry in from society? Are whites and Persians favored in that regard, and Black Baha'is not? That's a deep question that I think spiritual assemblies have to ask each other in terms of meting out justice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that comment, Chuck. Ella, I see you. I just want to piggyback on what Chuck was saying, where, you know, I've heard on multiple occasions how, and research shows this in education, right? The same act is done. So for example, you know, the laws are broken in some way by a white person and a Black person. And most likely than not, maybe the white person is strongly, you know, counseled not to do this action, versus the Black Baha'i loses his administrative rights. And so really thinking about that, even thinking about the data, where is the data and what are we doing and how are we educating? How are institutions being educated on these internal biases that we hold and we project in our everyday spaces and lives? And it's a continual learning process. Ella?
I have two things that come to mind. One is on the starting with the institutions. And I guess we can do this individually, but we've been studying the document that the DC Assembly put out. And one of the things that the DC Assembly does for their community is that they have a watchword question for everything that they do, every decision that they make. And that question is, what are the racial, cultural, class, and gender implications of this decision? And I think individuals in LSAs, but I think LSAs need to set the example, need to ask that question for their decisions, because I've noticed, and I think our assembly has noticed, that a lot of times this has been left out when making decisions. We make them fast, we make them quick because of time sometimes. And but when you ask this question, you can see the richness of your decision, whether there is justice in your decision, where there is diversity or culture or what have you. And especially with a lot of planning of events, if you don't have this included, sometimes you won't draw an African-American community or community of diversity, because it's really scaled down to meet the needs and the culture of one, and usually it's a white culture. But the other thing that comes to mind is that in terms of the Baha'i community, when I see the Persian Baha'is start to stand up for this issue and have as much compassion uh, um, as they do with the early believers of this faith, that we have come to have to study and know what they went through, the martyrdom that they went through, and have compassion for it. I think to me, and I'm not generalizing all Persians, but a good many are missing from this conversation, from the having compassion with our history and wanting to hear it. But how many times do we read, the Dawnbreakers, and have to know them by names? And why do we do this? So that it doesn't repeat themselves, so we can have more compassion and understanding for our Persian brothers and sisters, especially in the cradle of the faith. So usually when, and this is not a generalization, in a way it is, but it's not everyone. Usually when a Persian does, one of our Persian brothers or sisters does talk about the race issues, it's usually to shut down, it feels like it's shutting down a conversation. Oh, well, we had to have this happened to us and we didn't do this, or we had the same thing, and it doesn't further the conversation. So it would be really helpful, I think, when we see the Baha'i community, where everybody is included in the conversation and stepping up, like Catherine mentioned earlier, and hearing the stories and having compassion for the race issue in America and how it affects African Americans. So.
Thank you so much for that, Ella. And for those who are joining us late, I keep pasting the question in the chat so that you can refer to what we were reading and and the question we were looking at. Mary, I saw your hand up.
Yes,
Did you
thank you. Yeah, I'll go ahead. Thank you so much. I just love all the comments. I love how we started off with the hidden word, because for me, the part where Baha'u'llah talks about to see with your own eyes and not through the eyes of others, I think that goes to the point that you were raising about bias, and that we know that, science is now showing that we all have these biases, right? And so I think it's really important for us to examine our mental models and how we see the world, because many of those experiences shape what we say and do. And sometimes our responses are so unconscious that I've been in spaces where people have said something and I was like, oh, wait, did I just hear that? So it's not really truly where somebody's heart is at. But I think sometimes we're in spaces and people can say things that offend somebody, or that may not truly be, it reflects that the person has to look at themselves first. And I think that is the first step to answering the question, that we have to look within our own hearts and our minds to see, what is it that I need to root out of myself to be free of this prejudice or the biases that we have. Mm-hmm. And I love the next part where he says, that we should know from our own knowledge and not through the knowledge of our neighbor, because that to me says we need to be developing the relationships with people, true relationships where we're really getting to know somebody. and that we feel comfortable enough and that we're not going to have any other kind of backlash if you do bring something up to someone, right? And that we've all been in spaces where we're uncomfortable and there's silence and people are not speaking. But so I think that, with truthfulness is the foundation of all virtues, having those honest conversations is really important. So thank you so much for all the comments. I just love that you've created this space. So thank you. We need it.
Thank you, Mary. Diane, I see you. I'll call you on you in just a minute. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Mary said. In thinking about love, oftentimes we think of love as like almost like how do you say it? Deference in English?
Deference.
Deference. Thank you. Or not wanting to hurt people, but really, if we love somebody, wouldn't we want to call them out? It's an act of love, and especially our Black brothers and sisters, if they actually take the time to comment or to educate you or to share with you how you hurt them or what you're doing wrong, that's an act of love, because honestly, they don't have to do that. And so thinking about love in a different way, in an active way, as an act of caring and loving and wanting all of us to progress spiritually, because that's really the ultimate act of love. How do we help each other grow and progress from a spiritual perspective? So I just wanted to add that. Diane?
Thank you, Liz. I just wanted to make two comments. The first is that, in thinking back on the last many years and my own experience in the Baha'i community, and being a Persiophile myself, someone who loves the Persians and the Persian culture, I think that I know for myself and many of my other Baha'i friends, we have centered the Persians in the Baha'i community. They currently still are very centered in the Baha'i community. And I think what The Guardian and Sadie Oglesby, back 100 years ago, were asking us to do is center African Americans. We really just have not understood and internalized that. And it's going to take a major shift in our thinking. But, as you were saying, Liz, if we truly love our brothers and sisters, we need to have these hard conversations with the Iranians, let them know how much we love them and esteem them, but it's time for a shift. The Baha'i community needs to make a radical shift in its focus and it's I don't know, I'm searching for the word I'm looking for, excuse me. I think you understand what I'm saying though.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The second thought I'd like to add is that in terms of these pivotal questions that Ella was talking about, I think another very simple, basic pivotal question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we protect African Americans in the Baha'i community, as well as any African Americans who come into our spaces from the greater community? It's one thing to think about the implications and, that's all kind of a head thing, what are the implications? But how do we protect them? Because I don't think we're doing that right now. I think they are still tragically othered in the Baha'i community. And that must change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I was going to put in the chat the words of the Guardian: nurture, encourage, and safeguard from the advent of divine justice. And so thinking about how do we nurture and thinking about how not just protecting, because that can easily lead into white saviorism. Not that I think we're necessarily doing that, but also thinking about how do we empower not just protect, but also empower and nurture in our spaces. Mary, I know you had one more thing to add, and then we're going to move on to the next slide.
Yes, I'm sorry, I meant to say this, but
No,
there's a letter. I'm not exactly sure. I love this letter from, or the whole entire conversation with the National Spiritual Assembly, but I don't know when that took place in relationship to this other piece that I wanted to mention. But I myself and another person did a deepening in our community. We're largely made up of registered groups and individual Baha'is. And we first studied the Washington, D.C. document and had that whole conversation. And that's the lens through which that question that was posed, that's the lens through which we're trying to look at all of our activities, even though we're not an institution. But then following that, we also studied the April 12th of 1927 letter that Shoghi Effendi wrote to the National Spiritual Assembly. That has so many wonderful things that those are opportunities for us. So if people could study that letter, I was going to try to send it in the chat, but it looks to me like I can only send something that's like a Dropbox, and I have it like stored on my regular computer. So I can't send it that way, but maybe you know which one I'm referring to, the April 12th letter. So yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, that's a great letter.
and I can send it out later as well, but you can find it at if someone could put in the chat, worldembracing.net. That's where I found the letter itself. So thank you. That is a really great resource. We're actually studying it right now in our community, and it's really inspiring. So thank you for that recommendation. So friends, let's go ahead and move on to the next couple slides. I'm going to share my screen again so we can read it together. And I don't remember who's next.
I think I was, Liz.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, he said, the world is looking to see what the Baha'is of America are going to do for the colored man, and the peace and tranquility of the world depend on that one thing. In this great hour of turmoil, when everybody and every group of people are talking about universal brotherhood and justice, we Baha'is must be that center that is not living in the realm of thinking about it, but the ones who actually have it in practice. He laid so much emphasis on this. At the table, we intended to talk about this, but someone would talk of something else, and he would say, that is not vital. And then he would go back to this subject. Every country has its problem, and America's vital problem today is the colored problem. What does peace and tranquility of the world depend on?
So once again, friends, I'm going to stop sharing in a minute and paste this in the chat so we can have a discussion around this. Yes, Kathy.
It looks like even the beloved guardian had the same concrete example happen to him. He was trying to talk about race issues, and the friends kept distracting him with other topics. Thank you very much, Shoghi Effendi and Sadie Oglesby.
Thank you. How often does that happen though in our communities? Just really wanting to follow up. Charles, go ahead, please.
No, I was just thinking about how the statement was saying it's the colored part problem that's the base of the issue, and how it's I think it's important that we don't forget why that is. Not just that it's colored, but that the foundation of our faith is oneness. So to demonstrate, to help us to get back to where we really need to go, which is the spiritual oneness, which is who we are, then there is an example in this country of great oppression that's based on color. So here is our tool to move towards oneness. It's right there in front of us. I mean, that's And that should make it a lot easier, because if you solve this one, which has to do with blacks and white, the color thing, then you move to oneness. All the other prophecies about peace around the world and all that. So I just think it's important to think about that. And then on the other last thing is, as this is being done, it says that as whites, you do this for blacks, and be their protectors, do all of these kinds of things. But again, think about the spiritual principle involved in that. To have to be told that you need to be protectors of a person or a group who is downtrodden, that's a spiritual statement. It's a spiritual statement. And it's not something that's just been done for the Black people. The Black people have their connection with God. Have not had this thing of, I don't like you, but love you. So it's not their spiritual problem. It's an example for others to use to help to understand, what that is, to look at and love all people. And the most downtrodden in this country, it's identified, it's right there in front of us. So when we hear all these examples, I just think there are more in-depth levels to look at it to bring about that kind of spiritual consciousness.
Mhm. Thank you so much for that comment, Charles. So thinking about our own lives, and maybe we can talk about, to follow up on Charles' comment, what are some examples in which we are applying and elevating these spiritual concepts within our lives, within our spaces? I don't know if anybody can share a couple examples of what that looks like. Thinking about the spiritual qualities of oneness. Yes, Mary?
I think, some of the things that we're trying to do in our community is just, simple things of like, when we're all in Zoom spaces, and it's so unfortunate that we can't see each other, but it's so important because we can't see each other and be with each other, that we acknowledge each other, especially as they come into the Zoom meetings. Like when we come into the Zoom spaces, like sometimes nobody even says anything when you come in. I'm like, I go out of my way to be like, hi, so-and-so, hi, so-and-so. Just to try to spread that love. It's just simple things like that, so that people will know that you touch our hearts. And so we have some new Baha'is in our area, and one of them is pregnant, and sometimes they haven't been. There's just been a lot of things going on for the one person who's pregnant, and we formed like a little task force, and we said that the committee decided that let's have a baby shower for her. So she was so touched that we were thinking of her and having wanted to have like a little baby shower for her. So it's just simple things of that help build community. Those really can go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts?
Hey, Liz, this is Shegun.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is what Charles mentioned a few minutes ago. I'm looking at then the spiritual part of us we need to develop. I'm looking at it from this standpoint. Abdul-Bahá mentioned about the wing, the right wing, the left wing. And so that's the way we're gonna look at it. If we don't develop, so it's not that we're doing anybody any favor. We are doing ourselves. When you don't develop, then you cannot grow. So I don't want anybody to look at it just like they're helping. You're helping yourself. Right. You see, you look at the wings, unless those wings are developed, you let them develop, they cannot fly. Not as much as they would. So that's the way I think we all need to look at it. Not that you're doing somebody some favor. See, it's for you. And if each one of us realize that anything, any good we do is for our own, and Paola even mentioned the same thing, that anything we do is not for their benefit, it's for our own benefit. And therefore, it's very important we understand. So it's not that you're doing anybody, it doesn't matter whether they, whatever you call them, But when you don't develop yourself, it's very difficult. At least those wings you need to develop. You cannot fly as high as you are supposed to fly. And therefore, let's look at it from that standpoint that it's not that you're doing, whether it's, any group you want to call, develop yourself. And I think that's what the faith is asking us to do. Understand that unless we develop ourselves, then we will not be able to fly in the spiritual realms we're supposed to fly. And I think that's a part of the consideration we need to keep in mind. So whether you're working with anybody, it doesn't matter. If you don't develop yourself, then you can't even work with anybody because they already see your defect. They already see the defect in you. And once people see the defect, we can hardly work when they see the defect. So we need to look at it from the standpoint, what can I do to help myself? And once you help yourself, then you're gonna see how easy other people will be attracted to you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Shagun. I think it's so important to think about, and I actually have a few quotes coming up that talk about the race problem being a white man's problem, because I think we also, and Sadie Oglesby in this address also acknowledges that, and it's not necessarily to necessarily, you know, put the light and the criticism on white people, but it's to better understand how we have created this problem, because oftentimes we're taught via drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Not to address our own shame and guilt, but to project it onto other people. And so, you know, one of the ways that we do that is we don't see our own race or our own whiteness, but we definitely see and we say, oh, this is not my problem. This is a people of color's problem. You know, this is not, but we don't realize, and I think this is part of the work that I do in my own career, but also within different spaces, is thinking about how are we all being dehumanized? You know, for a group of white people to stand and smile and have a picnic at a lynching, for example, shows the emotional brainwashing and trauma that and the dehumanization that we've also been through. And it's nothing compared, obviously, to what people of color have experienced. But we also need to think about how this problem was created and how we're all dehumanized in the process. Because when we buy into whiteness and we buy into these ideologies, what is happening is we're choosing materialism, we're choosing capitalism, we're choosing hate, we're choosing all of these things to get a one-up in society, which is not in any way just, right? Thinking about justice and what that looks like and what collaboration and cooperation should look like is very different than what we have right now. And so even just going about and thinking about it, and if I have your permission, I'd like to move on to the next couple slides. Are we ready to do that? Yeah, okay. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay. Here we go. Does everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think it's my turn again.
Yes, thank you.
All right. He asked me if we had the teachings on that and if we read them. And I said, yes, they read them. Then he asked, do the American Baha'is realize the vital need of this? And I said, Shoghi Effendi, I'm afraid not. I think the Baha'is of America love Shoghi Effendi very much. And when they feel the depth of his desire along this line, they will carry out his desire. When I said that to him, I felt it was true. Here is one thing that Shoghi Effendi said: nobody can solve somebody else's problem. Would Sadie Oglesby evaluation of white American Baha'is still ring true today? What will it take for white American Baha'is to realize this vital need?
Oops, sorry. Okay. I'm going to do my, the usual. I'm going to try and exit here, stop sharing, and then I'll paste it in the chat. Ah, there we go. Sorry, this is awkward, but I do like to see everybody while we're discussing. So here we go. Any thoughts, friends? Chuck, I see your hand up.
Yes, this is a question dear to my heart. I think what most of us who are white don't realize is that our whiteness is killing us. That adhering to this mythology around whiteness and white superiority is damaging us spiritually. It's a moral damage. And, to convey that is a very difficult thing. I mean, for me, I'm still, after many years, still digging up and weeding out and continue to this terrible weeds that have grown in my heart through this kind of gaslighting and training as a white man. So I think it's to realize that. And I also was thinking back to the quote before that Du Bois talked about this century or the last century was going to be the issue would be the color line, the problem with the color line. And I don't think, I think some white people may hear those things and think that it's a black problem, but it certainly is not. Look at who caused the problems in the world. And we really have to get beyond our own guilt and our own shame about those things, deal with the trauma that we may have faced in our lives and move forward. It's difficult.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chuck. I almost included that quote later in the slide, but I didn't. From Du Bois. It's such a powerful quote on the color line. So thank you for sharing that. Kathy Lee, I see your hand up, and then Sue.
If anybody thinks it's not a white problem, just look what's happened in the last week. We have white supremacist militias that are armed, that have vowed to do acts of violence. And I often wonder if the Baha'is, particularly white Baha'is, had tackled this problem with as much earnestness, effort, supreme effort that the Guardian encouraged us to do back in 1938, I wonder where America would be today. And the Guardian talked about the Civil War, and that it took a civil war for the colonies and the states, not the colonies, but the states to finally form a union. And he said there will be many more tests, and they will be worldwide, and they will be difficult, and they will be designed to stir the conscience of people. And I'm looking at what's going on in our country. Are our consciences stirred to the depths so that we really want to arise and address this? This is serious. We could very much have another kind of conflagration in this country. That's what these groups are intent on. They've talked about a race war explicitly. This is in their manifestos. Just go online and read some of this stuff that's motivating these folks. This is definitely, we need to find ways to address the heart of white people. In 1985, when the House of Justice wrote their message, The Promise of Peace, they talked about racism not only affecting the victims of it, but the perpetrators are corrupted when engaged in racism and racial discrimination and any form of racial prejudice, anything that follows the big lie. And the big lie is not so much about the election. The big lie is that white people are better than everybody else. That's the biggest lie of all. And that's the lie that we have to constantly knocked down, not just in our words, but in our relationships, in our friendships. Who are we making friends with? Are they all looking just like us? Or do we have a nice bouquet of flowers in the human flower garden who we can call friends? Who do we call at 3 a.m. in the morning when we really are needing some help and some solace? Is it somebody who looks just like me? Or do I have a few friends that I can bank on through thick and through thin to help consult with me and help talk me through whatever the urgent issue is of the moment? So we have a lot to undo.
Thank you for sharing that, Kathy. Sue?
So thank you. Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I wanted to go back to a quote that was shared by Sue St. Clair by James Baldwin, where he said, "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see." And I've been really taking that in. I'm trying to listen to all the discussion at the same time. I'm really, really wanting to internalize that. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Of course, we just came out of 2020, and I was anticipating when the year started that 2020 is like perfect vision, and that 2020 was a year when we could just really adjust the way we see things and see things through how does Creator see things, and did Creator create us to see things the way he sees things? And then we have this pupil of the eye, and can we see things through the pupil of the eye? That's what the pupil of the eye is for. And then what is a cataract? A cataract is this white matter that literally covers the pupil of the eye, and you can't see because there's so much cloudy white matter that's covering it. And I'm thinking that's kind of like the situation we have in the human race, especially here in America. Well, I think all over the world, this white supremacy, this belief that white is right and black is not. It's or dark or just less than pure white. And what are we supposed to be seeing that we're blind to? And then what type of psycho-spiritual surgery do we need to do to remove these veils from our eyes that prevent us from really seeing with 2020 vision? I mean, I must say 2020 did serve to open up our eyes in many, many ways. And it gets back to James Baldwin's comment. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. I'm hearing that as words of Creator. I love you, and I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. So surgery can be painful. The aftercare can be painful. So here we are in 2021. And I don't think we're really seeing clearly yet. If we go back to this letter, this discussion of Shoghi Effendi with Mrs. Oglesby, and he says, do the American Baha'is realize the vital need of this? My immediate answer, even today, after 2020, a little bit, 2021, just moving ahead, I think a little bit we're realizing. And then what is it that has raised our realization is pain, and if I love you, the pain and love go together. Valley of Love from Seven Valleys. So it's and then it's to open up to the pain, open up to pain of what we have caused in this process of of learning to love. And then I'm thinking, to tell the truth, there's to become truth tellers. And then the other side of that is to become a truth lover, to actually love the truth. You know how it says truth hurts? But it's why does it hurt? Because we resist it. And then there's the boundaries. There's the boundaries. I mean, I grew up in inner city Chicago, which is very sharply divided by neighborhood. And it's not just only by color in the neighborhoods, but it's even by ethnicity, it's by culture, it's even by language. And then it's even, you know, there are just apartment buildings. It's just nothing but apartment buildings. And you can hear what your neighbors to the right and to the left and above and below are saying and doing. You can hear it if you can't see it. And, you know, I was just taught, raised, don't pay attention, mind your own business, put blinders on. Don't look to the left or the right or above you or below you. Just mind your own business and don't look and don't listen and don't hear and don't see. So this is part of what maybe I haven't grew up with an analytical mind, just looking at people as if I don't belong to them. But actually with a critical eye from a very young age. What's wrong? What's wrong with us? I just somehow inherently felt something's wrong. I just could feel it. I'm sure we all can. And then it's the matter of becoming comfortable with that. And even beyond being uncomfortable with that is, what do we say? What do we say? So I think that's where we are now. So it says, what will it take for white American Baha'is to realize this vital need? I think the pain is part of it, and that's beginning to come up. And I really, really want to, you know, acknowledge the white Baha'is who are present here, and just white people in general, who become present to what's going on. And then I think in our Baha'i work, especially this direction from Shoghi Effendi and Advent of Divine Justice, page 40, let the white make a supreme effort in their resolve to contribute their share to the solution of this problem. And you know, to say, I mean, I also grew up hearing people say, it's not my problem. This belief in separation, it's not my problem. I don't feel your pain. It's not my pain. It's only when it becomes my pain that it becomes my problem. And then do I help fix that which caused the problem? Or do I just make an adjustment within myself so that I'm not in pain? I think that's why we have so much substance abuse. And so much just abuse of relationship in general, is to try to make adjustments to the pain we feel, rather than to do what Baha'u'llah said, is to search for the cause of dis-ease. Why are we uncomfortable? You know, and when it becomes a disease. So it's to say, let us abandon once and for all our usually inherent sense of superiority. I mean, I attend a lot of these discussions across the board on Zoom, sometimes from morning till night, and I don't hear us addressing this question directly and staying focused on this question to abandon, find our inherent sense of superiority, and to correct this tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude towards the members of the other race. Even like, who gave us the power even to step up for them and to make them comfortable and to give them, it's as if we have the power and we're giving it to them. We all have power. We've all been given power. You know, so then there's this invitation to, I'm silent oftentimes because I want to leave the space and time for people who never speak to speak up. But then if they don't, then I used to just then jump in to fill in the space because I was uncomfortable with the silence. and finally an indigenous friend said to me, do you ever stop talking? Are you comfortable with silence? And I wasn't, whereas in indigenous culture, it is generally silent. Anyway, I've been going on for a long time, and I hope there have been some points that are made in here that if we could sort of stay on our own personal process of finding those pockets of superiority and making that correction within our own selves, and finding when we're feeling pain. It's a long and thorny road. Thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sue. You know, it really is a long and thorny road. And all I can share with my own path, which is also very thorny and a daily practice, is I just can't share how much all the mental health resources that we have out there that really help me, or, you know, spiritual thought leaders that aren't necessarily Baha'i, but help me deepen my own understanding of, you know, different, even just spiritual qualities, and what does that look like in our lives, and bringing ourselves to account each day and practicing them in different ways. And so there's just so many resources out there that we can use, but we have to put in the work. It doesn't magically happen. And so you know, every day thinking about, okay, I'm educating myself on these issues, but am I actually putting in the work in my own devotionals, in my own prayers and meditations, in my own life? How am I actually doing the hard work, the painful work, the excavation work?
And there was one more comment that came to my mind in talking about the thorny road. I was in a book club. We were reading the book Abdul Baha by Belyuzi, and there was a story about a thorn picker. And in the discussion, somebody asked, "What's a thorn picker? I never heard of that before." And it came from perhaps a culture in a village life where there weren't paved roads, there were dirt roads, and it was rural. And from the plant life around, there could be thorns in the road. And there was sufficient poverty that many people who walked down that path didn't have shoes. And so in walking down the path with bare feet, they would step on those thorns, and it was quite painful. And one of the means of making money would be to be a thorn picker, somebody who would walk the road prior to people of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the pecking order of privilege.
Yeah.
And the poorest of people, to make money, would actually go ahead of the more privileged people to find the thorns in the road, oftentimes maybe by stepping on them himself and taking those thorns to himself. Anyway, picking the thorns out of the road so that people coming after him wouldn't suffer the thorns in the road. And I think of that now. It's you know, if anybody's ever stepped on a thorn and gotten it stuck in your foot, you know, it's quite painful. All the nerve endings in the entire body are in the bottoms of your feet. Mm-hmm. So they're quite hypersensitive to pain. And so to step on a thorn when you're walking on a thorny road, it just made it very real to me. And maybe that's what we are. Maybe that's what we're all doing today, is being the thorn pickers, finding the thorns in the road. If it's a long and thorny road, maybe we just need to become thorn pickers and find those thorns and remove them, so that the people coming after us, you know, it's just empathy. Mm-hmm. For other people, rather than, it's not my problem, but I'm just sorry somebody else is having a problem. Yeah. And I'm willing to be a thorn picker to get those out of the road so that they don't have to step on them anymore themselves. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sue. I know Sue Sinclair has a comment.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to finally be able to be here this morning.
We lost you just for a minute. I'm sorry. I think I may have. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about what was being said about that the whites need to protect, nurture, and encourage Blacks. And of course, I do see that as true. However, that was said in the 1920s, 1930s, 1938 to be exact, in the Advent of Divine Justice. And so things have changed significantly since then. And certainly whites do have that position and that place as the sclera of the eye, the white surrounding the pupil. But what's mentioned earlier also is the centering of Black people. And it's not because we're Black people. It's not because of the color of our skin. It's because we carry the light that is needed to see how we are supposed to move this faith forward. Amatul Bahar Ruhia Khanum, when she wrote the letter to America, one of the things that she said is that the Baha'i faith is not yet the Baha'i faith as it's meant to be, because it was developed in America by the white dominant culture. And so if we think that we are doing everything that we need to be doing in order to move this faith forward and to be, for America to be the spiritual destiny of America to be that of spiritualizing the rest of the world, we can't do that until we center Black people and until we allow the vision, the insight, the intuition, the creativity, the knowledge of Blacks to be at the center of what we do. And that's not a beginning with words and ending with words kind of behavior or activity or a kind of attitude. It's really working to make that happen. The one thing that has changed since 1938 is that we are no longer identifying ourselves in the way that whites have identified us and seeing ourselves the same way that they have with the names and attributes or negative attributes that have been put on us by whites. We are now seeing ourselves in this light. And I think it began with the killings. Those killings opened up wounds that we didn't know we carried. And they spilled out to cause such pain and such discomfort that we had to transform to a place, be ready to transform to a place of seeing ourselves the way we are meant to be. And then when the people of the People of the Eye Conference came along, it came along right at the time when we needed it most because of the pain and the discomfort, people leaving the faith, people allowing themselves to be marginalized, allowing themselves to be forced out of the faith, because that's really what it amounted to, of being involved in activities. It was the People of the Eye Conference helped us to see that, on the contrary, Baha'u'llah has given us a designation, and he has made us something that we never thought that we could be, that we never understood who we were. We never understood it. I bought the book about the People of the Eye. I read it, I marked it up, I wrote in the margins, and I still didn't get it. Everything has its time, as Baha'u'llah said, right? And so this time now is that now that we're getting it, we are arising on our own. And we are agitating, as Shoghi Effendi asked Sadie Oglesby to do. We're agitating, we're bold, we're unafraid to express our thoughts. We no longer are allowing for us to be pushed to the side. So yes, I do believe white people still have to do what they are asked to do, but we're not going to wait for that to happen. The other last thing I want to say is that as Blacks in the faith, we have now reached the point where we no longer feel the desire to educate people who are white who don't want to be educated. Don't ask me what you should do. Don't ask me how you should be. Study the writings of the Guardian. Study the books that are being released over and over again, both regarding white people and books regarding the historical issue as it relates to whites and Blacks from slavery forward. Educate yourselves. Now, if someone is really working at that and they really want to make those differences, then I'm there. I'm there to walk beside you as I hope that you'll walk beside me. But I'm not willing to be what I had said early on at 18 or 19. Well, I'll take the position of being the educator. Not anymore. So I just wanted to say that. It's an important change from the 1930s.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate the perspective, because it helps me see what the future is going to be, and it just brings me so much joy in terms of what oneness can look like as we work towards that. So thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say one more quick thing?
Yes, of course.
As it relates to the Persians. The Persians are arising. They're starting to arise. And they're starting to arise across the country. And right now it may be in small pockets, but those small pockets are agitating other Persians to wake up and take notice and to be involved and to be a part of the middle of the stream, as Abdu'l-Baha talked about being, and being a part of our achieving our spiritual destiny. I'm tutoring a Black and Persian group in the new book one, and it is awesome. It is amazing. And they are starting to turn around, and even before we finish the book, they are seeking others to tutor, and they want to do it Black and Persian together because they see so much of the similarities between our cultures. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other? Yes, Catherine.
Now, when we started talking about on the other quote, a color problem, is it thought I came to was watching the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Spencer Tracy and Sidney Poitier. Now, I've seen that movie many, many times, but the last time I saw it, when Tracy was having this conversation with Sidney Poitier, talking about, because he's a Black man, and the thing that stuck with me and still stick with me is when he's told him they have a pigmentation problem. He was talking about the whites, and that has stuck with me. And when I see things going on, I say, oh, you got a pigmentation problem. And it's lighthearted, but it just stuck with me, what he told him, the problem. And I just wanted to put that out there, that pigmentation problem.
Catherine, I am going to share this next slide because it's a really great transition, and then we're going to come back. This is actually an excerpt from, hold on one second, let me just pull it up, because I think maybe this will kind of follow up as to what you were saying. This was actually Lerone Bennett Jr. I don't know if any of you know him. And this is an excerpt from Ebony in 1965. Catherine, would you mind reading it for me?
There is no Negro problem in America. The problem of race in America, insofar as that problem is related to pockets of melanin in men. Oh, the melanin. Okay, can't think of it. In men's skin is a white problem. Melanin. And in
the melanin.
Melanin. Okay, I can't. Okay, whatever she said. And in order to solve that problem, we must seek its source, not in the Negro, but in the white American, in the process by which he was educated, in the needs and complexes he expresses through racism, and in the structure of the white community, in the power arrangements and the illicit uses of racism, in the scramble for source for in the scramble for scarce values, power, prestige, income. The depth and intensity of the race problem in America is, in part, a result of a 100-year fight from that implacable truth, it was a stroke of genius, really, for the white Americans to give Negro Americans the name of their problem, thereby focusing attention on symptoms, the Negro and the Negro community, instead of cause, the white man and the white community. When we say that the causes of the race problem are rooted in the white American and the white community, we mean that the power is in the white American, and so is the responsibility. We mean that the white Americans created and invented the race problem, and that his fears and frailties are responsible for the urgency of the problem. By all this, we must understand that Harlem is a white made thing, and that in order to understand Harlem, we must go not to Harlem, but to the conscious of white Americans, and we must ask not what is Harlem, but why have we made Harlem? Why did you create it? And why do you need it? Wow.
I'm just going to give everyone a minute to read it one last time. I wanted to share it. It's actually a little bit further down in my PowerPoint, but I wanted to share it because I think it refers back to what you were referencing, Catherine, in terms of thinking about, you know, if white people have a problem with melanin, really, that's what the issue is. Then thinking about, you know, often we see problems and we ask, how do we solve the problems? But we don't necessarily switch questions around and change the framework within which these questions are asked. And I think that's what's so powerful here, is not thinking about why Harlem, you know, how to solve, you know, how to talk about Harlem, but thinking about why it was created in the first place. And so when we think about the race problem, thinking about why was it created in the first place, you know, asking the questions that don't necessarily come up. And I think that, and these are just my own personal opinions, thinking about the faith, what's so beautiful about it is that we all share and we're all creating a new amazing framework within which we're shifting the ways we're looking at things and the ways in which, and I think Sue St. Clair did such an amazing job in shifting the conversation from thinking about focusing on whites, or on this idea of the empowering, the nurturing and the encouragement and safeguard, to thinking about the pupil of the eye and what that really represents, and how we need that, because, you know, it is the light. And so these are our blind spots, and how the only way we can achieve oneness is really through the pupil of the eye. And so that's really powerful. I see Karen. Karen, hi, welcome.
Thank you. I just, maybe everybody knows that, but Lerone Bennett wrote an article in the 60s that was many, many pages in Ebony magazine, which is well read by the Black community. And the name of the article was Baha'i, A Way of Life for Millions. And I actually know generations of Baha'is that the mother read this article while she was having her hair done with the hairdresser, and she ended up becoming a Baha'i. I don't know how many people on here know the Robinson family. And there's Noreen Robinson, back in 1963, was given this article by her hairdresser while she was getting her hair done. And Lerone Bennett, that you just had that quote read, he is the author of that article. So you guys can Google it. It's on the internet, and it really is it was the cause of many people in the Black community learning about the Baha'i faith.
Wow, I had no idea. Thank you for sharing. We learn something new every day. All right, I know I'd like to, once again, I'm sorry about my voice. We have about 5 minutes left. I don't know how we want to go about, I see Chuck has his hand up, and maybe would be a good place to stop. We can take a few more comments and then we can continue on next month. Chuck? And then maybe any other final comments.
Thank you. I really appreciate that quote from Bennett. That's really great. And it echoes so many other things I've read. But I think one of the things he says here is like, when you think about the color line or the color problem, you know, who drew the color line? Who drew that line? You know, it was the people with the melanin problem that drew the line, right? You know, who made color the dividing line between peoples. And it also gives me hope because, you know, there was a time before whiteness and there can be a time after whiteness. And you know, whiteness is a construct. It's not a reality. It's a myth. It's an ideology. So I see hope in this. And, you know, a big part of this for me as a white person is to get out of the way of the pupil of the eye, to clear the eye, to get, you know, the cataract out of the way, so that the Baha'i community can flourish. And I think that's a big part of that for me. So thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Charles?
Just wanted to, this is toward the end, just to mention something that will be happening on Friday that would kind of, I think, is an extension of what is being said here, several areas. There is a fireside and the topic is Africa, a continent of light, reflections in the West. So there is too much to go into the dynamics of that. I'll be talking about spiritual substance origin, how it impacts people and culture and the world. Then it's an opportunity to hear that presentation. For those who are interested, if you're interested, we can send you an email, your invite for it. The person who's speaking on the portion that deals with Africa is Thelma Kalgate, who perhaps some of you might know. She's a former counselor. Many of you know she served in Africa for many years. And so I just wanted to put that out there. If you're interested, we can send you an invite. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kathy, I see your hand up.
When I came back from pioneering in Africa in 1988, my first job was at Morehouse College, a historically Black college in Atlanta. And Lerone Bennett came and gave a talk there. And he talked about his book, which I'll hold up. It's called Before the Mayflower. And it goes into wonderful exploration of the history of Africa way before Europeans invaded the West. And it was such a moving experience to be, I think I was the only white person in the whole audience. There were hundreds of wonderful Black faculty, Black students. I was brand new at my job and I thought, oh, wow, this is just like the place I just left. This was just like Africa. And his talk was so inspiring. I went right out and got his book, and it's very marked up and threadbare at this point. But I think there is so much rich literature by Black authors, current and of former generations, that I think it's important for white Baha'is, white Americans, period, to immerse themselves in this literature. It really helps to inform our understanding of a much more holistic and comprehensive view of history. It's much more truthful. It rounds out a whole bunch of stuff. It demystifies some of the mythology that we've inherited by, history's just been so whitewashed in this country. So I just want to encourage white Baha'is on our own journey, because what Sue St. Clair said is true. We can't turn to Black Baha'is or Black friends to say, help me understand what I need to understand. That's just too broad. We need to educate ourselves. There are lots of reading groups going on now. Several of the people on this call are engaged in that process. We're studying Black authors anew and again. And I think that's part of our responsibility. Our responsibility is to learn and deepen ourselves in literature as well as what the Baha'i writings say, because the two can really be a powerful foundation of knowledge.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Really appreciate all the comments that we've had today, and the really brave conversations. They're not always easy, and I think really reflecting on the questions that we're raising and thinking about now, not just having the conversation in this space, but really taking it to our personal lives, meditating on it, praying about it, acting on it in these different spaces, and really thinking about how do we center the pupil of the eye, and in all of our communities, and start imagining what the oneness of humanity looks like or will look like as we work towards it. Yeah. So with that, I don't know if we could close with a prayer. And does anyone have some good music they want to share maybe, or sing a song or say a prayer? I don't know if there are any volunteers. I actually have a song I can share. It's actually a gospel video from the same artist that we saw earlier. If everyone's would like to see it, you don't have to stay for the whole thing. It's actually 10 minutes long, and I'll play it, and then you can, exit as you want. Does that sound good for everybody? Okay, I will do that. Let me just pull it up real quick.